Welcome to the Bottom Line Up Front podcast. I am SEAC Colon Lopez, your fourth SEAC. Today, I have a very, very special guest to start the new year, and that is Miss Jessica Buchanan. She's a teacher, public speaker, humanitarian, a best-selling author, and a hostage survivor. In October 2011, while she was working as the education advisor for her non-governmental organization, or NGO, she was abducted at gunpoint by Somali pirates. I'm excited to talk to her today as we reach her 10th anniversary from the day that she was rescued. And also, I'm excited to go ahead and speak about the personal connection that we have based on this incident that took place, like I said, about a decade ago. So it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Jessica. Jessica, welcome to the podcast, and it is an honor to have you here.
Thank you. I feel very grateful and very lucky to be here right now.
Well, we spoke a little bit before we got the cameras and the mics rolling, but it is really surreal for us to be sitting here today after the events of that day. So before we get deep into the conversation, your book is out there. It is a bestseller. A lot of people know your story because you have been doing a lot of TEDx talks. But if you wouldn't mind, please talk a little bit about the events that transpired between 2011 and 2012, leading to your rescue.
So I am a teacher by profession, and I wound up teaching in an international school in 2006, 2007, to about 2009 in Nairobi, Kenya. And I met my husband, Eric, in Nairobi. He's a Swedish, he's an American citizen now, but at the time he was a Swedish national, and he was working for a Swedish humanitarian organization. And, we were young and we fell in love and got married, and he then was moved to another organization that was based up in Somaliland, up in Hargeisa in the northern part. And long distance and back and forth just wasn't working for us. So I decided to quit my teaching job in Nairobi and move up to Hargeisa with him. I didn't have a job, but I'm a teacher, so I'm a jack of all trades. And I started teaching English. We had a bunch of refugees living on the compound that we were staying in, and there were some kids running around. So that's naturally who I'm drawn to, and started teaching English. And before I knew it, I had an entire dining room full of students who would come in on their lunch breaks to learn. And then that progressed into doing some consultancies for the UN and in countries like Somalia or Somaliland, which is still not recognized. But they have so many ongoing issues with, like leftover explosives. They're still recovering even 30 years out from civil war. So there was a big problem in the area with kids running around picking up shiny objects, and then they would blow up and they would maim them, or they would blind them or severely burn them. And so I ended up actually creating curriculum for the country in the social sciences in conjunction with the UN on mine risk education and firearm safety education. And it's so interesting because, you just do the next right thing and take the next opportunity that comes to you. I didn't know anything about mine risk education when I moved to Hargeisa, but I learned. And what I found was there were not very many actually formally trained teachers working in these environments. And so my skill set to actually make the material ingestible and stick with our, the people in the villages and the kids, my methods worked because I was a trained teacher. So I ended up getting a job for a Danish organization, the Danish Demining Group, and managing their entire East Africa portfolio. And I would travel from South Sudan all the way down to Kenya, Uganda, and essentially, I was living my best life. I was so happy. I really felt like we discussed earlier how purpose and meaning is so important. And I felt like I had a lot of purpose and a lot of meaning in the job that I was doing. I feel like a lot of times I'm touted as like going to Africa to save children, and that's not how I see myself or what I set out to do. But I grew up in a household where it was very important to use the skills and the talents that we've been given and to try to make the world safer and better. And so I felt like I was doing some sort of service. And it was interesting and fun. It wasn't all altruistic all the time. It was just a really cool life. And I was called upon to hold a training down in the southern part of Somalia in Galkayo in October of 2011. And it was part of my portfolio, but I hadn't been down there yet. DDG had a field office down there. And I'd had 2 trainings scheduled down there, but I canceled both of them because of security issues. I just didn't feel good about it. And, like expats were not typically the target. But I also didn't feel like I was, providing food assistance or medical equipment or life-saving work. I was just down there training staff. So I didn't feel like I needed to put my safety at risk to go down and train the staff. The staff could have come up to Hargeisa or something like that. But my colleague, Paul, he was a Danish gentleman that was heading up supporting that field office. I'll say that he put a lot of pressure on me to come down and conduct that particular staff training. So I felt really cornered and like I didn't have much of a choice if I wanted to maintain my job that I loved. So I got on a UN plane and headed down to Galkayo, and it was a 3-day staff training. And the first 2 days were in the North office, and they went great because we had 2 separate staff because they could not easily cross over this green line that separated the town of Galkayo. So they belonged to different clans. So I worked with one set of staff that belonged to one clan, and then I was going to have to cross over the green line and go to the other field office in a separate convoy of vehicles, working with a separate set of staff. And I was really nervous about that. But they had been going back and forth easily, and nothing had really happened that I knew of. So the 3rd day, which would be October 25th, 2011, I woke up that morning. I had had nightmares like all night long that I was being kidnapped by pirates. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, like, do I really want to do this? But I'm here, and all these logistics have been organized. The convoys are waiting for us. My staff is waiting for me. But I knew in my gut that something was wrong, but I ignored myself and I ignored what I knew to be true. And that has been one of my greatest life lessons we can talk about later. And so I got ready and walked out the door and into a whole new life. So we made it across the green line. We conducted the staff training and everything went fairly well. We concluded around 3:00, I think, in the afternoon. And I noticed we had a local Somali security advisor. His name is Abducted. And I noticed that he kept getting on the phone. And, but I don't speak Somali. We spoke a little bit at the time, but not enough to be able to follow his conversations. And then he'd get off and he'd say, we had to wait 10 more minutes. The vehicles weren't ready. And I kept thinking, why aren't the vehicles ready? Like, their only job is to pick us up. They should be here waiting for us. But it wasn't my field station. I wasn't in charge. So I deferred to my colleague, Paul. And no one seemed to think anything was amiss. So it took like 45 minutes for the convoy to come and pick us up from the compound. But when they finally did, there were 3 land cruisers. There were armed guards in the front, and we were in the middle. Paul was in the front passenger side, which was on the left, and I was behind him in the back. And Abdi Rizek got in next to me, and then we had armed guards in the back of the vehicle, and then a third vehicle behind us with armed guards. And we pulled through the compound gates and started driving through Galkayo probably at like 25 miles an hour. You know, the streets are narrow and bumpy, and it had been raining, so everything was a bit muddy. And we drove for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, and you know, I'm not really paying attention. I'm like on my phone texting my husband and checking my work emails and, you know, doing the normal things, wondering when I'm going to get my workout in or whatever. And a vehicle just roars up, really like rushes past us on the right side and cuts us off so that we can't keep going, and splashes mud up all over the windows and the windshield. And I can remember thinking, what a jerk. Like, who drives like that? I think people drive like, you know, idiots everywhere, but this was particularly stupid. And then I actually feel more than I hear the crack of the butt of an AK on the car hood. And then I start hearing all of this screaming, all of like very angry sounding Somali men surround our vehicle. And then Abdi Rizak's door is pulled open, and there's a man dressed in a SPU uniform, like a specialized police uniform. He's got an AK, and he pulls Abdi Rizak out of the car. I remember he like drags him out of the seatbelt, like the seatbelt is still on him. And I remember him just like bashing his head into the ground with his gun. And I am not processing anything, you know, at this moment. Like, I've been through heat trainings with my organization, but nothing can prepare you for whatever this is to actually happen.
A little bit of shock.
Like, absolutely. And I'm just like kind of feeling like I'm almost like floating outside my body watching all of this happen. And then this guy, he has like pock marks all over his face, and his eyes are just like wild. He gets in where Abdi Rizak was, and he puts the gun to my head, and somebody gets in the back and crawls into the back of the Land Cruiser, and then he starts screaming at the driver to drive. And we just tear off through town. And I can tell we're heading south, which to me is a really bad sign, because I think south is Mogadishu.
Yes.
South is Al-Shabaab. Mm-hmm. I'm an American woman. My passport is in my work bag. There's no way I can fake being American if they don't know, because my ID is right there. And my mind just like starts to shut down, and all I can think are just two things. Like, I have two very rudimentary thoughts that just keep going on repeat. And the first thing is that this is bad. This is really, really bad. Like, whatever this is, maybe at best they're going to carjack us and take our sat phones and our belongings and kick us out, and we can walk back to town. But whatever it is, I don't have a frame of reference for it. So I don't know how to start making a plan, because I don't know what to compare it to. And then the second thing I keep thinking is, like, even if at best they kick us out and we walk back to town, I think my life from this point on will never be the same again, because it was more than just the act of like the car being taken over. It was a shattering of my belief that things don't happen to girls like me. You know, I'm a good Christian girl, and I'm using air quotes here, right? If I grew up in the Midwest, I'm from Ohio, I'm a school teacher, you know, like I should be like exempt from pain and suffering somehow, you know. So it's such a stupid thing to think, but I think in those moments you're like, wow, okay, like this is happening. And so we just drive for hours. We stop. Guys get out of the car, different guys get in. We stop again. We have to get into other vehicles. I can remember Paul being in the front seat at one point, turning around to check on me, and I just whispered to him, what is happening? And he looked at me, I think with pity, and just said, we're being kidnapped. And we just drive all night. And I remember at one point hearing a very high-pitched voice behind me, and it sounded like a woman sitting right behind me. And I thought that would be very, very strange, especially in Somali culture where men and women are kept very separate. And I finally, my curiosity got the best of me, even in the middle of all of that. And I turned around and it was a little boy. Probably not. Well, I learned eventually that he was 9 years old and his name was Abdullahi. He had actually attended one of the trainings that I had created and was wearing my organization's paraphernalia and swag. So that felt like an ultimate betrayal.
Yes.
We finally drive for hours into the middle of the night and stop. And we're forced out of the vehicle and ordered to walk out into the desert. And the man who orders me out, he has a long, I don't know the technical names, but it's a machine gun of some sort. And he's wearing chains of ammo and he has a turban on his head. And so at this point, I don't know who has us. I don't know if this is ideological. I don't know if this is going to be a ransom situation. What I do know, or what I think I know, is that whatever is waiting for me out there is not going to be good. I'm surrounded by men. I am the only woman. I suspect that I'm going to be assaulted and then probably murdered. And so I tell him no. I'm thinking he can just shoot me right here. I'm not going out there. And he gets really aggressive and in my face, and we go back and forth like this. And Paul comes over to me and he takes my hand and he says, "Jessica, we need to walk." And so we walk out into, it's just black. It's just a void. It's just dark sky. It's dark night. I remember tripping over rocks and thorn bushes because I can't see. I'm just using my hands to feel my way, but I'm hearing the clink of their ammo as they're walking, and it feels like more of them are coming out of the shadows, and suddenly it's not just 10, but it's 20, and then it's 30. And we walk for I don't know how long. It feels like an eternity. And I say goodbye to my husband, and I say goodbye to my father, my siblings, and
Your phone had been taken away at this point.
Everything's been taken away. It was strange though, because I have a thyroid condition, and I without medication, I'll die. And I had my medication in my bag with me. And I remember somehow thinking I need to get my medication when we got out of the vehicle before they started marching us out into the desert. And they let me take it. And I do remember thinking, why would they let me take my medication if they're going to kill me?
So that gave you a little bit of hope.
I mean, I think in those moments, you're grasping onto anything, whether it's logical or not. Yeah, but I mean, I'm being marched out into the middle of nowhere, surrounded by an army of armed men. There's not very much hope at this point. At this point, yeah, I'm just saying goodbye, and I'm asking my mom for help. She died the year before. I'm asking for strength and dignity. That felt very important to me. I mean, I think many of us, I can imagine, especially the men and women that you serve with, think about what those moments are going to be like at the end. If you get a chance to be cognizant that it is the end, and you wonder what you're going to do and what it's going to be like. And I definitely never expected to go out that way. So it took me by surprise, and it was very important for me to be dignified at the end. And then they order us down onto our knees. And then they just tell us to go to sleep.
So at that point, when you know that they're in control, and we had a rash of incidents, because shortly before your rescue, we had executed the rescue Captain Phillips at sea. And, the kidnap for ransom business was something that was very common in the area, especially by the pirates. Al-Shabaab would have been a different story. And that typically doesn't end well.
Nope.
So, but at this point, you still didn't know who had you.
Mm-mm.
So when they order you to your knees, what went through your mind at that time?
This is the end. This is it. And I don't understand why. Like, I'm not fighting in some war. I'm a humanitarian aid worker. If they didn't want me here, I wish somebody would have said so. Absolutely naive, but not so naive to, I've gone in here on the order of my organization under the security and protection of the United Nations. Like, I'm supposed to be okay. I was 32 at the time, and I wanted to become a mother, and I kept thinking about the fact that I had just put it off, and I was never going to get that chance. All of the regrets, all of the things that I never got a chance to do, and the things that I didn't get a chance to say. And then it was all just a big ploy, right, to scare us, because they just wanted us to go to sleep. And so I think it's very interesting how your mind will shut down and let your body take over in these circumstances, and it knows what you need in order to protect itself and to survive. And so it's so weird, but I passed out, I think, from the stress, and I think I did sleep for a little while, because I remember waking up when it was starting to get light out, and Paul was there, and he had laid awake all night, and he was trying to figure out what was going on and who had us, and had figured out that they'd made some calls to the UK because he could hear, when you dialed the wrong number or something, and it was in English. So he was starting to piece things together. It would take a very long time for us to figure out. It's just so complicated and layered in terms of clans and who had us and who was collaborating with who. And they would then move us. I think we moved 50 to 60 times throughout the course of the captivity. So, it was hard to keep information straight. But I do remember thinking when I woke up that morning, if I can survive the next 48 hours, if I can stay alive, AKA if they don't kill me, then I think I have a pretty good chance at surviving.
Well, and that is a perfect segue into the next chapter in the story, because now you're captured. Now you're assuming that they're not probably going to kill me anytime immediately. They're keeping us alive for a reason, and Paul Fisted is piecing things together. English language, probably trying to reach somebody that either they're assuming that Paul's probably a British citizen, so they're trying to get somebody to get money out of it, which is something that actually can be comforting. Because now you know that, hey, I'm worth something. I'm not just something that I'm going to be used for propaganda.
I'm not a statement.
Yes. So talk to me about the following morning or the next time. You say you slept for a little bit, but then you woke up. So what happened?
Then it was just a, sit and wait scenario. We kept asking, well, we didn't. I mean, maybe we asked once or twice. There were so many, in my memory, there were so many men around. Like, it just felt like dozens milling around and, setting up camp. Of course, they're all chewing chat. So they're high and they're hopped up. Everybody is very, very nervous. And we're trying to figure out how we're going to get water. It's kind of like first order of business is like, we need some water to drink. We need food to eat. Someone dropped a small container of biscuits for us to eat. And, then it was also like the brass tacks of being a hostage, like holding on to the cardboard because you might need toilet paper, or trying to figure out, someone dropped off a small tin of tuna fish, which we would exist on for the entire captivity. Like, how do you eat a tin of tuna fish with your hands, and stuff like that? How are you going to keep clean and stay alive? Because there are so many different facets of trying to protect yourself in a hostage situation. And we kept asking for, can we call our organization? Can we call our family? And they kept saying, we're waiting for the translator. We're waiting for the translator. And we kept thinking that they meant the negotiator, but they didn't have the language for it, that they were just using the wrong word. And so we sat there for like a week before they let us make any kind of call, which we felt like was very long. But now, in retrospect, understanding how hostage takings in this part of the world work and how immeasurably long they can be, a week was nothing. A week is like a second in some of people's situations. And then they brought this man. His name was, he called himself Jibril. And he was, I don't know how old he was, but he seemed elderly and hunched over and missing teeth. And he had pretty good English language. He said he was a teacher in Mogadishu, and he had indeed been brought to translate. And so we were like, oh, okay, so they really did mean a translator. And then it just spiraled from there into, sometimes it was just ludicrous. Some of the events that would unfold in terms of like, driving us deep out into the desert in the middle of the night and putting us on the phone. But they shut down our family's phone numbers. And I didn't know this, of course, then, but now I know that the FBI was involved immediately because it was a crime against an American, but then they are trying to coordinate with the Danish government. Then you have my organization involved. You have a very angry Swedish man, my husband, involved, who knew the Somali region very, very well because he's worked there for over 20 years. And my family, Paul's family, I mean, all the moving pieces on that side, it's just so vastly complicated. I think it's like almost as complicated on the family side as it is on the hostages side, because there's just so many people involved and so much coordination. And I mean, I can't even fathom the amount of coordination that was going on, that I now have just heard bits and pieces of. But yeah, it is the most terrorizing boredom I have ever or will ever experience, because half the time you're scared out of your mind, and then the other half you're bored out of your mind. And so it's just a waiting game.
Yeah, and the waiting game is a way to put it, because sometimes when you're in those type of situations, time speeds up, and a lot of times it just grossly slows down. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't even imagine those days, between your tuna meals, looking for water, trying to go ahead and take care of your basic needs, and fearing for your life, how things were like. But 93 days in those conditions, I'm going to tell the audience now the other side of things. So when Jessica was kidnapped, we got notified at my former unit. I was in a specialized unit in the special operations arena, and we had been tracking a lot of the intelligence into where Jessica was, who she was working with, her medical condition, the company that she was keeping. We were trying to go ahead and track that rat line that she spoke about, that this group of SUVs left and they started traveling south. Then we started changing vehicles. We started going to different places. And that is a usual tactic when you have a kidnap for ransom thing, because they know that the big eye in the sky is always watching. So we have been tracking your situation, and there were two things that we were always looking for. And that was proof of identification, knowing that it was you and Paul, and proof of life. After the first few weeks of the captivity, it almost gives you a sense to where, okay, maybe we have a little bit of time to go ahead and find them, because it was a needle in a haystack, really. These particular groups, they know the lay of the land really well. They know where to bed down. They know how to go ahead and blend with the population if there's population around. And we constantly kept a team around the clock looking and looking and looking. Shortly after your kidnapping, you got kidnapped in October. Late November, right around Thanksgiving, I had to leave the command. And it was almost like a disappointment that I didn't get to see Bell, as you were calling the objective, Octave Fusion, that I didn't get to see this particular mission pan out. But I checked into my new unit at Herbert Field in Florida, the first Special Operations Wing, and we were still tracking because we were then the air component that typically supports missions like yours, hostage rescue. So on that particular afternoon, and this is actually on the 21 January, it was a Saturday, I remember. And Janet and I, my wife, we started watching a movie, and I got the alert to report to duty. Report to duty usually meant that either we were doing an exercise or there was something that we needed to go ahead and deploy quickly. Our bags are always packed just in case it happens. All habits die hard. So I reported to the Joint Operations Center, and I met with Colonel Bonfine at the time, and with Colonel Slife, who was the first Special Operations Wing commander. And the first words were like, all right, so the president made the decision to go ahead and get Jessica. Her health is not doing all that well. We need to go ahead and get her back. We have an idea where she's at. We can go ahead and keep on tracking. And then as soon as we have the proof of life, positive ID on both her and Paul, we'll be able to go ahead and execute the mission. So Colonel Slife made the call right there in the briefing that I needed to go on the mission because of my habitual relationships with the people that were going to go ahead and execute this. And part of me was glad, but part of me was pissed because I was no longer going to be the person that was going to go ahead and execute the rescue. Now I am part of the headquarters element that is supposed to run this mission. So in a matter of an hour or so, we boarded a small plane, went to Fort Bragg, started the planning for the mission, waited for the C-17s to come out, to go ahead and get the force moved and postured in Djibouti. And then we set up camp in the Camp Lemonnier and sent a headquarters element or small element forward to Galkayo, the vicinity of where you were last sighted. So we had a very, very diverse group of people, and by diverse I mean different backgrounds. So we had logisticians, we had mechanics, we had pilots, intelligence personnel. You have people from all the Army, the Navy, the Air Force represented, a few Marines that were stationed there at Camp Lemonnier, and now everybody's postured to go ahead and get you rescued. Now you are at the tail end of your captivity. 93 days into it, what is going through your mind at this point?
I'm feeling pretty low. I have gotten a urinary tract infection, and I'm fairly confident that it's moving into a kidney infection because I've had one before, and I was hospitalized in Nairobi and actually had to have surgery. So I know that this is not a good thing for me. I need an IV. I need to be in a hospital. I need IV antibiotics. I'm, throwing up all the time. I am crawling to the bush. And it's interesting because day by day, your humanity just gets broken down like a little bit more. And then you realize that you are no longer a human being anymore. You're just a commodity. Mm-hmm. And you don't actually have to, you don't have to be healthy. You just need to be alive enough so that you can be cashed in, and that's all that matters. So I'd stopped asking for medicine. I'd stopped asking for a doctor. I'd given up on that. And we were ordered to sit under trees, like acacia trees or large bushes during the day. Mm-hmm. And they were very concerned about somebody watching us, drones or whatever. And I thought that was preposterous because I had no concept of what was going on. I'm like, we're just a couple of aid workers. You don't have to worry about it. No one knows we're here. Like, I was very wrong, but I couldn't have known that at the time. And we then had to drag our mats out into the field to sleep out in the open at night. And I never understood why they wanted us to do that, but that's what we had to do. So the sun goes down around 6 o'clock, fall asleep, wake up probably around midnight, because I'm sick. And there were 9 guys on the ground that night. And always at least one of them was awake. Somebody had to keep guard, make sure we're not going to escape, make sure we're not going to be attacked. But everybody was passed out. And I needed to use a bush. So I said the word toilet, which was just how we generally asked to be excused from the mat. And no one woke up. So I say toilet again. No one wakes up. So I had a small pen light that they had given me. So I start flashing that because I want them to know that I haven't tried to escape or run away. Go to my bush, do what I need to do. I come back to my mat, try to get myself settled in, but I can start hearing it sounds like there's a small animal or something coming through the brush around me. And we're separated. We're in the same camp, Paul and I, but we've been separated for many weeks now and haven't really been allowed to talk to each other as a punishment for negotiations not going well. And so he's, I don't know, several hundred yards away from me. I can't see him, and it's really dark. It's cloudy. It had been clearer that night, but then the stars and everything had disappeared. And I mean, so dark, I couldn't really see my hand in front of my face. And then I get up to shake my blanket out because I think it might be bugs or something. And then I lay back down. I do this a couple times, and finally I just give up because I know my only escape is sleep. So I lay back down to go to sleep, and then about 30 seconds goes by, and the pirate sleeping on my left, I hear him. I can't really see him, but I hear him jump up, and he is holding his AK, and he's screaming at the other pirates to wake up, to get up. And then the night just erupts into automatic gunfire.
So let's go ahead and pause right there for a second. I'm going to read you a couple of the notes that I had in here. But on 22nd January, so we were en route via C-17 and just discussed the priorities of work with Colonel Barnfine, what we were going to do once we hit the ground. And then I started reflecting about when I was looking at the people that were involved in this mission, because a lot of them were in shock. They have never been called upon to do what we were about to do. And I put in here, the train like you fight and organize like you fight analysis solidify my belief on excellence in garrison leads to victory in combat. The way that we train actually has a purpose. So I was thinking about how I was going to keep communicating with the force to make sure that we kept them engaged once we got on the ground to keep them going. But I also wrote this entry here that, operators save lives, regardless of risk to themselves. Such commitment instills trust in others that someone will come. All right. And that was really, really what almost every single person in that organization at the time. When I say organization, I'm talking all of the services working together to execute this mission. And then I put in here, the formula for understanding what a service core competency encapsulates is simple. And it's all about the winning effects. Winning effects meaning getting you back alive to your family. And that was purpose plus mission plus capabilities, which is systems and skills, are all required for success. This is something that we just talked about. And what happened in the next 72 hours from the second that we hit the ground is, number one, we had a maintenance issue with one of the planes that we flew from Herbert Field, the Talon 2s that we ended up deploying to perform the parachute jump to get into Paul. So one of the aircraft broke. Okay. And we're like, all right, we need the aircraft to go ahead and execute this mission. So we ended up coordinating with Bagram in Afghanistan. No flight operations because it had a snowstorm, a couple of other things. So we were able to go ahead and get planes to start making their way to Camp Lemonnier to be able to serve as a backup. Now, what I witnessed in those 72 hours were all of those maintainers, those mechanics that I spoke to you about, the security forces that were there to make sure that they kept the cordon outside the operations, because we wanted to make sure that we exercise full operational security. The element that went forward to Galkayo, everybody was waiting for the planes to be ready in order to go ahead and put the operators, the assaulters, in the aircraft so that they can parachute in, travel several kilometers to your position undetected in a period of darkness to be able to surprise the enemy and get you. That was the operational side. The sustainment side of this operation were a lot of people, and a lot of them in their early 20s, that refused to go to bed because they wanted to be there if the aircraft was going to depart at any moment to go and get you. They refused to go and get food. They will send a runner, and the runner was the most unlucky person, because if the mission went, then they will be left out of the mission. And they were working around the clock just to do so, just because of that purpose. They knew what was going to happen, and nobody wanted to fail you. Now, the operation, and I'll go ahead and turn it back to you over from the shots fired, but this is what led to that particular scenario. So we had cloud cover over the target. It was coming. It was very sporadic. The decision was made to go ahead and proceed with the mission. The parachute insertion went as planned. Team landed, they ended up securing the parachutes, and then they started their patrol toward your location. They knew exactly where you were. Once they reached the target, they held short, and then they proceeded to go ahead and surround it. Now, this is when.
Well, I don't know that this is who this is yet. So all I'm thinking as bullets are flying over my head is that I need to stay as low to the ground as I possibly can. And I am not going to survive. Like, I'm pretty sure finally this is Al-Shabaab or it's another clan that has come to get us. And I know that I don't have the strength to survive another kidnapping, essentially. It's kind of like I've decided it's better the devil I know. And so all of this is running through my head, and I'm just praying that I don't get shot. And I pull the blanket tightly around me, hoping maybe no one will notice me. And then I feel somebody grab my legs and my arms. And my memory is that I'm screaming and trying to protect myself. I've come to find out that it wasn't. I just had my hands up in front of me. And somebody pulls the blanket down from my face, and I can't see anything because it's just so dark, but I can make out like silhouettes, and it kind of looks like masks and stuff, but it's just all very dark shapes. And then I hear the voice of a young American man. And he knows my name, like he knows who I am. And he says, Jessica, it's okay. I know you're scared, but you're going to be okay. We're the American military and you're safe now. We're going to take you home. And he helps me sit up, and just shock just takes over, and I start to shake uncontrollably. And all I can say over and over again is, you're American? You're American? I don't understand. In my head, I'm thinking, like, where did you come from? Like, I don't know how this could happen. I don't understand. I just cannot make my mind understand what's going on. And one of them has a bottle of clean water and some medicine and gives it to me. And he says, we've been watching you. We know how sick you've been. And another gentleman asked me if I know where my shoes are. And I don't know where my shoes are. And so he warns me, but says, I'm going to pick you up and carry you. And we need to get out of here. We need to get somewhere safer. And so he picks me up and throws me over his shoulder, and we just take off running through the field, or he runs. I'm like hanging out there, and thinking, how can this be my life? It's just like, I'm a school teacher from Ohio. Like how is this happening to me right now? And then he puts me down, and my first question is Paul okay? Did he make it out okay? And he's sitting there, he's fine. And he says, Jessica, do you know who these guys are? And I haven't gotten that far. And he says, this is SEAL Team 6. These are the guys that got bin Laden. And I'm like, okay, okay, and then shock it just completely takes over. I can't stop shaking. I can't answer their questions. Like I can't, yeah. And they're milling around, they're making sure the premises are safe. They come back, and then it's like, it's not enough that these people that I don't know have jumped out of an airplane in the middle of the desert to come and rescue me, but then they have Paul and I lay down on the ground, and several of them lay down on top of us, and then the rest of them form a shield, essentially like a human shield, around our pile of bodies to protect us, because they're not sure the premises are safe.
It was pretty flat, and the one thing that was in everybody's mind is, okay, so how close are any reinforcements for these guys? Because
which is going through my mind as well. I still don't understand the caliber of what has just happened and who is here. I'm thinking we all have to get out of here. We have to get out of here because they're calling their people, and they're in cars, and they're coming after it, because my mind has become so small and so scared of my captors and what they can do. And I also can't see. It's dark. I don't know how many people are there. And I don't understand who this is or what this is until we're on a plane headed to Djibouti. And then it's like, what do you even do with that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do with, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things to process. Something happened right before the shots were fired. And I was in the operations center just watching the mission go down. And I was sitting next to the mission commander. And he was fidgeting with his coin, much like the one that you have right now. And as they were reaching the bush where you guys were at, cloud cover just took out any visual that we had of what was going to happen. And he says, well, I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse that we're not about to see what's going to happen. Shots are fired. Everything was done in a matter of minutes. It might have seemed like an eternity to you, but it was done in a matter of minutes. So now we have positive control. We're bringing you back, and we had you both under positive control of your governments. So before we get into the debrief part, how you were able to get repatriated and everything else, I want to touch upon a little bit of the military readiness that takes to go ahead and execute a mission like the one that you were, a part of. In the coin that I gave you, there's a phrase in there that says, amateurs train until they get it right, professionals train until they cannot get it wrong. And that takes years to do so. That group of operators, the Special Tactics Airmen, the SEALs, the soldiers, the aviation component, the Air Force aviation components, they train around the clock to do just that. And it's my feeling now that sometimes when we have a fair weather environment, people, especially the American public, tends to lose sight on the extent of how far these young men and women, or some not so young, are willing to go to sacrifice their life for somebody that they don't even know. Not only that, but then give you that comfort once they come face to face with you to let you know that things are going to be okay. And then to be able to keep in touch with you after that happened, which is what happened with me. So we closed out the mission. Then we had several other days to where we started learning from everything that happened and so on. Then I move on assignment to assignment to assignment, but it wasn't until I got here to Washington, D.C., and I started using LinkedIn that I stumbled upon you. And I reached out to you. What were your thoughts when you first heard about this random person that is reaching out to me?
Well, I have to be honest, it happens to me a lot.
Yeah.
I've been fairly vocal about my experience, partially for that reason, because I understand that there are so many people. I'll never be able to thank every single person, which is why Eric and I decided to write the book, because we wanted people who were involved in bringing me back to know how grateful we were. And we were very aware that we would never be able to thank every person individually. And I am still, it's been 10 years and I am still amazed that on a regular basis, someone will reach out to me and tell me that they played a part, tangentially, or their family member did, or someone did. I mean, it's mind blowing to think that you're just a regular person and that all of these resources and all of this talent and all of this commitment was channeled into bringing just one person home. Sometimes it can be a lot to process. But yes, you and I had a phone call, and once I understood who you are, and the role that you played, and now sitting here, I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's funny how life works, and not only do I have the notebook because I keep these things for a reason, because this is really what life's purpose is all about for an operator. But also on the second floor of these quarters, there's a souvenir that I picked up for my wife when I was while I was deployed, an African souvenir, and it was always meant to have double meaning, because she was under the impression that once I left the command, that I will never blow out of town, at a moment's notice and just pick up my bag and go. And she's like, really, is this going to keep on happening for the rest of your life? Luckily, it never happened after that. The other ones were scheduled after that. But also just to be able to reflect on everything that happened on those few days and everything leading up to your rescue. Um, it's just good to remind yourself of the goodness of mankind, especially in the grossly negative environment that we live in nowadays. Mm-hmm. It's always good to remind ourselves, you know what, when the rubber meets the road, we Americans are going to band together and we're going to make things happen just because we take care of one another. I mean, will you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people still matter, and service to our country and to each other still matters. And, why I have been so lucky to be the recipient of this, I don't think I'll ever understand or know, but I'm grateful. And I think that it's a really beautiful picture of when every single person is doing their part and striving to be the best version of themselves in their work, then look what can happen.
So you mentioned the book. So you wrote the book, and New York Times bestseller, Impossible Odds. And then you started taking the speaking circuit.
Yeah.
Not only because you wanted to tell the story, but most importantly, because you wanted to help people understand this. There were a couple of things that you mentioned about your travels in Africa, kind of like the complacency, just looking at my email, not paying attention, something didn't seem right, and then not following your gut that morning when you were having those nightmares. You work with a lot of nonprofit organizations now, specifically with hostage rescue type scenarios. What are some of the key things that you tell them that you wish you would have known prior to this, and that you want them to go ahead and be prepared with?
So I do support a DC-based nonprofit called Hostage US, and they are not involved in any kind of negotiation or rescue efforts, but they support families of hostages and detainees, and then during captivity or detention, and then they support the returning hostage or detainee when they come back. And the thing that I was very surprised and not at all prepared for was that, you think that the actual captivity part is the hard part, the hard thing to survive, but the hard part is the survival piece. And I think that this doesn't just pertain to people who've been held captive or detained. It's anybody who's experienced a traumatic event in their lives. Like, how do you come back when something like that, that significant, has changed the trajectory of your life? I lived, and I love living, and I'm so grateful for it, but I lost my job in my profession. I essentially had to leave Africa because my PTSD was so extreme, which was not ever a part of my plan. Everything changed. Everything was different. And so I had to figure out how to rebuild, and I think that is very universal for all of us. Whether you've lost a job, or you're grieving the loss of a friend or a family member, or whatever it is, there is this mourning period that's finite, and then the grief that comes with the loss. And in that grief, you have to figure out how you're going to make the choice to rebuild and reinvent yourself. And I talk a lot about that for returning hostages in that space. And I call it surviving survival, because there's just not enough. I don't think there's enough research, observation, or support for people in the days after, in the months after, in the years after. I'm 10 years out, and I still cannot talk about this without crying. And I have healed exponentially so, and I am good, and I am happy, and I am healthy, but I still need support, and I still need direction. And it's my life's journey. It will never be over. And I think that it's very important for people to understand that, whether it's your loved one who's been affected or it's someone that you work with. Surviving survival is real, and it needs a lot more attention, I think, than we as a culture and a society give it. So I do a lot of work around that. Also, I do a lot of work around women's empowerment because I feel it's very important for women to learn how to listen to their own voice, their own intuition, and to trust it. And, in my instance, in my case, I didn't. And it changed my life. And while I'm able to extract meaning and I have worked really hard to rebuild, would never want to do that again. And so I'm on a mission to empower women to hear their voice, to trust it, and to listen to it and follow it.
That was a very, very pointed statement that you made, that you disagreed with Paul, but you decided to go anyways, and you should have done different. Do you still keep in touch with Paul?
No.
No? After that repatriation took place, you guys split?
We tried to a little bit, but there was a lot of disagreement around why the kidnapping happened in the first place. He disclosed to me on day 27 that there was very relevant reason to believe that there had been a direct kidnapping threat on the organization, but that had not been disclosed to me. Yeah. And so, in the aftermath, I confronted my superiors, and their answer was, we didn't think it was a viable threat. And my answer to that was, it's Somalia. It's always a viable threat. Informed consent is a very important thing in your duty of care. And I felt that they had failed. And it changed my life. And there was never any owning up to that. And so, a lot of people ask me a lot about forgiveness. And I will say that I've never had a hard time forgiving the pirates because they weren't the ones that I was angry with. Maybe my anger was displaced, but I felt like my organization failed in their duty of care.
Well, and that's critical, because when you lose faith in the organization, or if you feel that the organization is withholding things from you, it can definitely take your loyalty away from it.
Absolutely.
Very, very key to the way that you feel right now. But the survival is really interesting to me. Because in my current position as a senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, this particular year, as an example, we have a very, very strong drive to go ahead and get after the issue of suicides in the military, and also a lot of issues with PTS. Like you, I have my own scars, and I have learned to cope, but like you said, it never goes away. We'll never be able to shake this stuff off. But we learn to live with it, and part of the healing process of it is to share experiences so that people can learn from it. As you see yourself moving into the future, now beyond the book, now with your TEDx talks and everything else, what do you think is going to be the most value that you're going to bring to society based on your experience?
I think this commitment that I have for empowering people, and, I generally focus on women because I feel like that's the group that the audience that I'm most comfortable speaking with. But for anybody, I'm a big believer. This has taught me that the things that life brings you, they don't happen to you, they happen for you. And we were talking about how, it's important for both of us to extract meaning from every situation that we encounter. And I think that that's the only way to make life survivable, is to find the meaning. And I think that that's why we've been put here, is to figure out how to make it all mean something. And so, what I do in my day-to-day, actually in my professional life, is I work with people to help them figure out what those things that have changed the course of their life, what it means, and then I help them speak about it. Because absolutely, we have to talk about these things in order to reduce stigma, in order to reduce feelings of isolation, in order to build community, because we are so much stronger together than we are alone. And so often when people who have, and every single person on the planet experiences trauma. None of us escapes life unscathed. Yes. So if we can figure out what we want to say and how we want to say it, then we can take what we've experienced and we can turn it into well, I think it leads us to our life's purpose. And I would have never in a million years seen myself sitting here on a podcast talking to you. But here I am, right?
Yeah.
And I think my bottom line is that you just have to keep showing up. Whether you're like sitting under a tree out in the middle of the Somali desert, or you're sitting here on a military base having this conversation, whatever it is. And if you don't think you have the strength to show up, then you need to find somebody to help you to do it. And we have to be able to talk about that.
And very, very strong point for anybody listening that, purpose is a driver. Your courage is going to be the action mechanism for you to go ahead and do something. And then just your conscience, knowing that you did the right thing at the end of the day, it's really what's going to keep you going day by day. And it's a continuous cycle for us to do it. If you wouldn't mind, I want to share with you now the final thoughts that I had on the plane ride back from Djibouti to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And this one I titled A Lesson Learned in Dedication. And it reads, for the past 72 hours, I have witnessed a team of professionals work long hours to ensure the rescue of an American citizen. All came here with one goal in mind, bringing her back alive after close to 90 days in captivity. I saw planners working every possible course of action, drilling down on every single what if to ensure we did not get it wrong. I saw maintenance crews take to the flight line to make sure the iron, meaning the planes, was ready to fly. I saw assaulters, operators, rehearsing and taking input from all the elements tasked with this mission. And I saw leaders taking ownership and ensuring all pieces were in place before we told the nation that we were ready to execute. Regardless of rank, position, or duty, the entire task force demonstrated excellence and dedication. Nobody whined, bitched, or complained. The common question was, what do you need? When we brought home the hostages, there was no loud celebration, but a clear sense of accomplishment and content by doing the nation's tough work. Only a few could have pulled this off, and I am proud to be in the company of those few. We did the nation proud by ensuring the President of the United States' call to bring an American back was a mission accomplished. That was my thought when we got on that plane right back, especially looking at their faces once again, just that fulfillment that they had done something good. Jessica, we live in a good place and we have a lot of good people, and so many get bogged down by negativity. And something else that I saw on a post, I think it might have been a random post, and I thought it was pretty catchy. And it was about positivity. And the post actually said, don't be so negative, something I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Don't be so negative, but, because your house, the house that you live in, is the dream of the homeless. Your health is the dream of the sick. And it just went down a list of basic needs of being a human being. And as we sit here, we are examples of what good can happen when we actually decide to just go ahead and put our strengths together. This has just been an absolute honor to do this. If you have one thing that you want to say to every single one of those that haven't met you face to face, that had something to do with the mission, what will you tell them right now?
Thank you. And I wake up every day and I spend an hour in gratitude for the life that I get to live, that you brought me back to. And I'm working very hard to make you all very proud. Thank you.
Well, you are making us proud. You are a shining example of what good can be done with the worst possible situation. But most importantly, like I told you upstairs, you are a symbol of hope for those that are potentially going to be put in situations. Jessica, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us today. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully, we'll continue to stay in touch and we can help each other out with our common goals in life to continue to help those that are struggling. But for the audience, we're going to post the links to this podcast, the video and the audio, in a lot of our social media and other resources. And I want to also thank Mike and Carlos for the outstanding work of setting this up and getting us together to finally do this. And lastly, I just want to tell the audience that this is just a small example of all of the great work that America does on a daily basis. Not much of it is publicized, a lot of it with reason, but it's happening every day. So for anyone that's got doubts about the effectiveness, the lethality, and the readiness of your Department of Defense, take this as an example of what we can do on a moment's notice to be able to answer the call of the nation. So again, this has been your Bottom Line Up Front podcast. Thank you for listening, and until the next time.